Hi, everybody. Welcome. Our last class for this series. Remind me at the end, I'm going to announce we're going to do a new series in February, Be'ezrat Hashem, um, but very different. But today we are still in the 1950s, so let us open up and see what we're doing and let our learning be for the refuah shlema of everyone who needs it, and the success of our soldiers, and the return of our final hostage, and besorot tovot for everything. Okay, so we are in our last class, and in a way, this is somewhat similar to the class we did before, number five. We talked about religion. This is somewhat less serious, somewhat lighter. We're going to hear some music, okay? But it's also asking the questions of identity, right? One of the things that is very important, it's still important today, but it certainly was important in Israel's first decade, was trying to define who we are. So last time we talked about trying to define who we are with regard to religion and the Judaism of the Jewish state, right? How Jewish, how Zionist, how modern, how democratic. Here we're asking similar questions, but we're also asking, are we socialist? Are we capitalist? Are we Eastern? Are we Western? Are we for the collective or the individual, right? And this decade has a transition in many ways from collective and connected to the war and very austere to kind of emerging into a newer, somewhat freer identity. So that's some of the things we're going to talk about. Two caveats. First of all, culture is a very, very large subject, and I do not pretend to be an authority on it. I am going to bring you some fun things that I enjoyed exploring, but realize that this is a drop in the bucket and there's a lot more out there. Number two, there's not very much here, and that's really my fault, about the religious Zionist experience, right? Last time we talked kind of about the ultra-Orthodox, the Haredi experience. Today is really going to be mostly the secular Israeli experience. Religious Zionist experience was not exactly out there in the mainstream, and therefore it's not as represented in books and websites, everything else. So that's also something that's missing. So just be aware of those two things. The picture, of course, is an accordion, because an accordion is going to be so important to the music of the time and singing along and army songs, and that's a very strong part of Israeli identity even after 1948. So we had to have an accordion, and we'll be hearing some accordion music. Okay, let's start with perhaps the first thing we might think of, popular culture, but culture nonetheless, right? Collective culture, and that's television. And there is no television in Israel until 1966. Okay, so nothing in our time period. And the fact that shocked me more than that is there is no color television officially until 1983. Okay, so people who've been living here for a while will be aware of that. People who have not or who don't live in Israel will be, I think, rather shocked. But if we think about, the American cultural experience of the 1950s, and that's why I brought you this picture here of the family sitting around the TV, that is not happening in Israel. Okay, there was very great objections to the idea of television, bringing television to Israel. Okay, David Ben-Gurion, perhaps very presciently, said we will go from being the people of the book, Am HaSefer, to the people of the screen, Am HaMasach. Right, and he didn't want that. This was against the cultural ideals of the time. Yigal Allon goes a little bit of a different direction. And he says, what's going to be this mass culture? It's all going to be nargilot, right? Smoking a hookah and belly dancers. A bit of a racist approach, but very much objections to the idea of television. There were also, besides the cultural objections, economic objections, right? If you recall back to our third class when we talked about the economy, it's very expensive to live here. We do not want to encourage foreign spending. Okay. I have a question here about Jordanian TV. People, first of all, didn't have television sets. There are no television sets here in the 50s. Maybe somebody, very rich smuggled it in. But For sure, Jordanian TV. Look, I remember when I made Aliyah in the 90s, we would get transmissions from Jordanian TV. Um, but certainly this was not happening in the 1950s. So we had economic objections, right? Things were very expensive and imported. And when color TV comes in, again, the government objects because it's going to create a huge gap between the wealthier people who can afford the color television and the poorer people who can't. So, no color television for everybody, right? We think of the government today. Some people will say it's autocratic. Why? Nothing compared to what things were in the 50s. To the extent, and now this is not our time period, but I'll just add it because it's such a crazy fun fact. People who would bring in and color TVs before 1983, they had to be fitted with something called a mechikon, an eraser, which took out the color because you should not be watching color when everybody else can't watch color. Okay, but the Israeli mind, the Yiddish cup at work, an Israeli engineer invented something called the anti-mechikon, which you could buy and then you could erase the color erasure. So yes, we are a very innovative people. Okay, instead of television, what did we have? We had radio. Okay, and radio also a number of stations, all of it on Reshet Aleph. Okay, not exactly huge broad range, and I just brought this sheet from Kol Yisrael, which is Luach Shidurim, right? It's the what's going to be shown this week, right? This is from the 50s. I didn't write down what year it is, but in the 50s. And you have, the program for the week in the middle of August. You can see the music, largely classical music. There was also like Hebrew songs, but not, something otherwise. But I will just point out a few things that I loved besides, you have the music, you have the theater, but you also have, where is it? Yes, down here at 5:30 on Wednesday, Pinat HaShachmat, the chess corner, which is an hour and a half. That's quite a lot of chess. Okay, go up to over here, Prakim B'Dikduk HaIvri, right? A fascinating 45 minutes about Hebrew grammar. So the idea of culture, at least from the radio perspective, was to educate you, to acculturate you, to bring you into the world of Hebrew and Israeli culture and Jewish history, etc., etc. Okay. Um, so, what were people listening to? Yes, there were people listening to classical music, but most people are listening to what even today we will think of as the Israeli songbook. And the very beginnings of that are happening during the war, okay, during 1948, which of course has a huge impact on Israel in so many ways. Okay. So, the first army entertainment troupe is something called the Chizbatron. Hey, it's a strange name, but it's an amalgam of two words. Hey, the easier part is the ron or the tron, from the word teatron, right? A theater in Hebrew. A chizbat is an Arab word for a tall tale. Okay, so the Chizbatron was a theater that had different kinds of songs, but also sketches, jokes, tall tales. And this is the first one. There were others also in 1948 based on various army units, the Chishtron, right? For the Chish, for the infantry, or the Carmel, or the Elon, right? The idea was to raise soldiers' morale. Right? A very well-known songwriter, but he was also an army commander in the Palmach, Chaim Chefer. He went to Yigal Allon and he asked for permission and for a budget to create some kind of an entertainment troupe for the soldiers to keep the morale up. And Yigal Allon says, "Great, go for it." He gives him 10 lirot. Okay, not exactly a princely sum. And Chaim Chefer goes out and buys an accordion for 40 lirot, okay? And he starts to write songs and comedy sketches, and they go out and they perform. It's for the troops, it's for the soldiers. But as we're going to see, what they do, the songs that they perform eventually become part of Israeli culture, and they travel all over. You can see the picture over here, right? They have gone out to an outpost in the middle of the desert, and it's these songs with, various dialogue and sketches in between. Okay? And a lot of it, obviously, about army life, things that are going to be reflective for the soldiers, that they are going to get the jokes, not necessarily anybody else. But realize, we talk about soldiers, soldiers is the society, right? Everybody's a soldier at some point. So even though it's very much an insular kind of jokes and community, but everybody is in that community at some point, or most people are in that community. What are they singing about? Hey, a lot of what they're singing about is war. Right? They're thinking about war. They're singing about fallen soldiers. They're singing about their army units, right? Songs about the Shir HaPalmach, right? Or songs about the greatness of each different unit, but not only, okay? So we'll just, first a minute, just to understand two of the most famous songs, I think, from this time period, right? One is Bab El Wad. We talked about this, I think, in the very first class, right? A song written, a poem originally written by Chaim Guri, about the caravans breaking through, breaking the siege on Jerusalem, bringing supplies to the city. I think all of us are familiar with the trucks that still line the road, but that's what the song really is about. And Bab El Wad, Shar Hagai, the gateway to the valley, right? This important part of the road from Tel Aviv, or from Jerusalem to Tel Aviv, right? Bab El Wad, remember our names forever. Convoys broke through on the way to the city. And of course, the most famous singer who sings this song is Yafa Yarkoni. We'll come to her in a minute. Another very significant 1948 song, Hareut, right? The comradeship or friendship, remembering everybody. Ach nizkor kulam et yufei hablorit v'hatoar, all of the beautiful, handsome people. Reut shekazot leolam lo titein et libenu lishkoach. This kind of comradeship will never be forgotten from our hearts. Ahava mikudeshet b'dam, love that is sanctified by blood. Atashuvi beinenu lifroach, and you're always going to be flowering amongst us. So these are very heavy, very serious songs dealing with the realities of the time. But this is not the only stuff that's going on. They are also doing more comic songs about everyday life or life in the army. And they're also doing, and for this I am going to share something different here. Okay, we'll come back to our PowerPoint in a minute, but we are going to do a short musical interlude. Okay, so here we go. Let's see, I always am hoping that this will work. Let's find out. Okay, so this song is based on the music of one of the well-known dances of the time. Okay, and here we go.
אל תאמר לי שלום, אמור רק להתראות.
We heard it for a minute, then we lost it.
It's there, but it's soft.
אל נא תאמר לי שלום.
מגונים הלילות, לכן אל נא תאמר שלום, אמור רק להתראות. גדרו שמיים.
Okay. Sorry, we're going to get rid of you, Yafa. Okay. That, of course, was Yafa Yarkoni. And I'm going to go back to my sharing, but I don't know how many people recognized. Nope, sorry, wrong one. Yes. How many people recognize the style of the music, right? This is a tango. Okay, there were songs that were written for tangos, for foxtrots, for waltzes, for all different kinds of things. Okay, I'm not trying to make you dizzy. I'm just trying to get back to what I want to be on. Yes, okay. Sorry, here we go. Okay, fine. So that's our cheese batron. Okay, I don't know why this is not doing what I want it to do, but fine. And it doesn't last for very long. Okay. By the way, the accordion, why the accordion? It's portable and it has a range, and it's not so hard to learn how to play. Not that I know how to play the accordion, but you know what I mean. Um, and This is not what I want. I'm sorry, I'm making you all crazy. I want to be able to see people while I am sharing, and I don't know why I can't do that. That's what it is. Okay. All right. Whatever. Okay, cheese batron does not last very long. It kind of falls apart. And in the early 1950s, the army still needs some kind of entertainment for the troops, but they bring in outside performers. It doesn't go, right? Because the soldiers want something that they can identify with, that they can connect with. And so what the army decides to do is to create army troops, lahakot tzvayot, right? Soldiers that are, which still exist today, right? Soldiers Lahakat HaNachal, right? The Nachal troop. We'll talk about Nachal in a minute. Okay? Later on, you have Lahakat Pikud HaMerkaz, Lahakat Pikud HaDarom, right? The different army units. There are different entertainment troops. They travel all over the country. So I brought you a couple of pictures here. First of all, the guy in the middle. I don't know if anybody is good enough at identifying faces, but this is Chaim Topol. Now we're going to talk about him, Chaim Topol from Fiddler on the Roof. Okay, this is messing me up today. Um, and the picture is of the bus. Okay, I'm sorry, I did not mean to have so many problems for all of us today. Okay. So the bus is this is today at the Nachal site in Pardes Chana, but they would travel, right? They would go all over the place so that they would be able to present for the troops. And again, we want to ask, okay, so what are they singing about? So Lahakat HaNachal, what's the Nachal? And Nachal is a special army unit created by David Ben-Gurion before 1948. The idea was that these were members of the youth movements who wanted to stay together. And they went to Ben Gurion and they said, create a special army unit that's just us. Is that okay,
Is it
everybody okay?
Noar Chalutzi
Noar
Lochem?
Chalutzi Lochem, exactly what it says here. Okay, now they not only were members of the youth groups, but they also had a dual function. Okay, and you can see that both in the stamp here, which is kind of cool. It's the helmet with things growing on top of it, but also in their insignia, which is still their insignia today. My second youngest son was in the Noar in his army service in the Nachal. They have obviously the sword they're fighting, but they also have the sickle. They also have branches, olive branches. They are farmers, settlers. The idea is that the Nachal settles land, and that's what they did a lot in the 50s. And even today, the Nachal is involved in, right, Magal Vacherev, exactly. The Nachal is involved in all different kinds of settlement and cultural activities and all different kinds of things like that. So, what are they singing about? Okay, so they're singing about settling and fighting. Okay, so two very famous Lahakata Nachal songs. Okay, one is called Hora Heachzut. Okay, the hora, of course, is a dance, and there were different kinds of horas. And one of the horas was called Hora Heachzut, the hora of holding on to the land. And it's all about farming, but also fighting, right? And the song begins, Yodea Chakla'i Pikeach, V'hu Hinchil Zot Latzava. The smart farmer, okay, the clever farmer knows certain things that he has taught to the army, and it goes on and it tells us about the Sayarei Hatut and the Sayarei Agvania, right? The different army units of the strawberries and the tomatoes, right? Combining the two things. A lot of very clever wordplay. I brought you a little piece here Kol hashka'a shel tznon v'gezer hi hashka'a lizman aroch. And if you look carefully, you'll see that hashka'a is spelled differently in these two places, right? Hashka'a, the first one, is watering. Every time you water the radishes and the carrots, you are investing in the long term. Hashka'a with an ayin, right? So playing on this ideal of farmers, fighters, they're doing both those things. They're also talking about things that are happening out in the bigger world. Okay, and another hora, and this is another famous one, is called Hora Mamtera, right? The hora of the water, of the watering. And what is it talking about? It's talking about the national water carrier, right? This huge project that is happening in the 1950s, and it's celebrating bringing water, right? So just read a little of the words and then I'll play a little music. I'm going to try it one more time. I know I'm gambling here, but sobi sobi mamtera, right? The sprinkler should go around and round. Lifazer pnine ora, to spread out the pearls of light. Sobi vahatizi mayim, go around and spread water and sprinkle water everywhere. Etziaria bashtera, the trees will be singing in the avenues. Adamati ten pirya, the land will be giving its fruits. Be'ein geshem meshamayim, even though there's no rain from the sky. So it's a celebration of this huge project. And again, we will attempt to play. Okay, right. It's definitely something that is an only in Israel experience, celebrating something like this. And we'll play one more song. All right, here we go. Sovi Hora Mamtera. This is sung by Shoshana Damari, one of the great singers.
Sobi, 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 mamtera. رون کیلو احبت نور سندور طور کیانه گت دار کوشر هم میزمور مین ها برز لارد بیالو ممتهم ماش ابا مرت لحم نگب نگب مامیوم نگب مام تر تل حسابی صابی
Sobi, Mamtera, hey, so, so,
Sing along.
نینه اورا صابی به هاتیزی مایم اتیاری یا باسیرا آدماتی
Sobi, Tempiria, Geshem.
مایم گشم
Okay,
میشایم
Shoshana, we could listen to you all day, but you're gonna have to listen on your own time. Okay, let's go back to sharing. Yes, where are we? No. Yes, today. Okay. Oh no. Share window has closed. Okay, good. Zoom, you're giving me troubles today, Zoom. All right. Ah, that's what I want. Okay, good. All right. Yofi. Um, so this is La Katanacha. Now, one of the things that's very interesting here, we have two legacies that come out of these bands. Okay. Number one, after people leave the army, you would think, okay, you leave the army, you move on, you do other things, but they take these songs with them. Okay, they have what becomes super popular in the 50s and is still going on today, Shira B'Tzibur, right? People getting together. I don't know who is talking, but somebody mute yourself, please, whoever you are. People getting together with an accordion, with a guitar, singing these songs together. And these keep the songs alive and they become the Israeli songbook. Okay, these Lakot Tzvayot later on, the heyday of the army entertainment troops is the 60s and the 70s, right? And these are all original songs. There's lots of writing that's going on. They're writing these reviews. 8 to 12 original songs each time. That's huge. So that's one legacy. Okay. This is going to drive me crazy. Who is speaking? Can't see. Whoever you are,
Ruchama.
stop speaking.
It's Ruchama.
Okay. Ruchama, I love you, Ruchama, but please mute yourself. I'm looking for you here. Don't see her. All right. She figured it out. Okay. And the other legacy is that basically all of Israel's biggest stars get their start in these army bands, practically all of them. Okay, Shoshana Damari, who we saw before, wow, look how glamorous she was. Okay, she actually did not serve in the army, but she did perform for the troops a lot as an outsider, as a civilian entertainer, and she was very identified with the troops. Yafa Yarkoni, of course, she's the singer of Bab El Wad. She's the singer of Hareut. She's a huge star. She's really considered the army singer. They're in the first, the first wave. After that, you have everybody from Yehoram Gaon, right? Here he is in Casablanca many years later. Chaim Topol in Fiddler on the Roof or Salah Shabati. Okay, Yossi Banai, Arik Einstein, Uri Zohar, right? Everybody who's anybody in the early decades of Israel is perform. It comes up through these army troops. Also the writers, okay? Chaim Hefer, Sasha Argov, Moshe Milensky, Theo Moar, these are the names, and they all get their start in the army troops. So that's really a very important legacy that we have from this. Okay, moving on from music, okay, talk a little about cafe culture, something that still exists very much in Israel. People love to go to coffee shops, sit outside, schmooze, meet people, walk down the street. I was in Jerusalem today. You walk down Rehov Yafo, nobody goes to work. Everybody's sitting outside having coffee. It was a beautiful day today. And this is definitely part of the culture of the 50s as well, even though, right, we know there's the tzena, there's the austerity, there's no food, often there's no coffee, okay? But, or there's no real coffee at least. Be a way to silence everybody. Hold on. All participants. Mute all. Beautiful. Okay, except me. If you want to unmute yourself, you can unmute yourself, but meanwhile, you are muted. Okay, so we have cafes, and cafes become the place that people flock to, ordinary everyday people, right, with their babies over here, but also a lot of celebrities, writers, singers, actors, comedians, right? Everybody comes to sit, to hang outside. This is the Bohemians, this is the parliament, this is where people come to discuss the issues of the day. Like with everything, certain cafes are more fashionable, certain cafes are less fashionable. Hey, some of the important ones, you have this one, Cafe Royal, which is like an amalgam of the names of the two owners. This became the place for people to come and hear the celebrity gossip, right? The most important cafe in Tel Aviv, Cafe Kasit. That's these guys over here. This is where all of the writers of the day would sit around, Leah Goldberg and Natan Alterman and Avram Shlonsky, right? And the actresses and the actors, Chana Rovina and the comedians from Lul. Everybody would come, they would hang out. Natan Alterman, who we're going to talk about a little bit later, Thursday nights, he would write his weekly poem for his column, Hatur HaShvi'i. He'd bring it, he'd read it to the writers who were there. Right? Jerusalem also has a coffee culture, but not as much as Tel Aviv. But there are definitely people here, I'm sure, who remember Cafe Atara, Alav Shalom, right, which was around till, I don't know, late 1990s, I think. Right, and people would come to see, to be seen, to discuss the issues of the day. Um, just a little tiny bit. We'll talk about this because we did talk about it when we talked about the tzena, right? What did we eat? Nothing like today. Today, if you keep kosher, or even if you don't care about kosher, Israel is a foodie destination. Israel was not a foodie destination until about 20 years ago. What could you get to eat? You either ate at home or you ate in like very basic, like workers, poalim restaurants, or like European restaurants where you go and you get chopped liver and cholent, or falafel, right? Falafel, the ultimate street food. It's cheap, it's democratic, it's good for people who want something a little exotic, right? And this is a falafeleria in Tel Aviv in the 50s, and you could see whether this guy is really Taimani or not. He's dressing the part, but everybody's coming to eat. But of course, the best example of the ubiquity of falafel is the falafel song. right? Shir HaFalafel, which doesn't have much of a tune, and that's why I'm not even going to bother to play it for you, but it does have great words. Okay, and we'll read some of the words. L'chol medina kam ba'olam ma'achal le'umi hamukar le'kulam, right? Every country in the world has its national food. This is 1957. This is long before politically correct and cultural appropriation and people saying that Zionists stole falafel, right? This is our national food. Kol yeled bagan yodea Ki ha'ochel macaroni hu italki, right? Every child in nursery knows that the person who eats macaroni is Italian. The Austrians eat Wiener Schnitzel, right? They have Schnitzel. Hatzarfatim ochlim tzvardeim. The French eat frogs. Hasinim ochlim oriz dak v'razeh. The Chinese eat, skinny rice. V'kanibalim ochlim zeh. And the cannibals eat each other. Again, not particularly politically correct, but funny. ולנו יש פלאפל, 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 לאבא מתנה, גם אמא כאן קונה, לסבתא הזקנה, נקנה חצי מנה, right? We're going to buy for mom and dad, and even for our old grandmother, we'll get her a half. וגם החותנת היום תקבל פלאפל, פלאפל עם הרבה פלפל. And even the mother-in-law will get falafel with lots and lots of pepper, right? And it goes on, and it's a fun song. Okay, so that's giving us a little bit of the lighter side. And one more thing before we get into more serious, art and writing, clothing. All right, clothing is certainly part of culture. Okay, what do we wear? So Israel in the 50s is kind of a split screen, right? On the one hand, most people are dressing very, very functionally. Certainly in the time of the Tzena, when there's not a lot of imports or almost no imports, and people don't have money to spend, and the government even goes and makes cheap and very bad quality clothes. We talked about this in our economy class, right? The Lacoste company making these just garbage clothes, work clothes. You're meant to look like a worker. You're gonna have your kova tembo, right? Your hat, very simple, very cheap. But that's not the only kind of clothing. There is also a turn towards the larger world. Israeli designers, right? And this is the beginning of brands like Gotex, right? And you have a much higher class. And one of the famous designers is someone named Lola Bear. She comes from Europe and she kind of reinvents herself in Israel and she becomes a seamstress, but a seamstress to the rich and famous. And she kind of sets herself the job of dressing the wives of important government officials who basically they're chalutzim. They wear work clothes. They look terrible. And she says, no, you can't go out into the world looking terrible. And she designs clothes for people like Paula Ben Gurion and Golda Meir, who were hardly fashion plates, but she made them look respectable in going out into the world. And there are fashion shows, and there's a trend to looking towards styles from Europe, and this is the 50s, of course, and you have the wasp waist and all those kinds of things. Who can afford these things in Israel? Not so many people, right? But there is this kind of elite and this attempt to have Israeli high fashion as well. And then what I think is the most interesting is something called maskit. And again, I'm sure there are people here who remember maskit, and now it's come back. Maskit starts with someone named Ruth Dayan, right? Ruth Dayan, Moshe Dayan's wife. In 1949, she, like many people, is working with the waves of new immigrants. And she sees that they have a lot of skills, right? The women can do beautiful embroidery, especially the Yemenites. The men can do this beautiful silver filigree. And she has an idea that, on the one hand, she can use these skills to give them a way to make money, to give them dignity, right? That they're not these Nabuch Miskinim, that they're coming and we're going to give them everything, but they're going to bring something of their culture. And she sees it as a way for her to have a business and the government to make money also. And she goes to the government and she asks to create a company called Maskit, which literally it's a Tanakh word for jewel, that is going to do a few things. It's going to take from these skills of the immigrants and the styles of the immigrants, embroidery and filigree and all these things. It's going to take from the colors, right, as she saw it, the colors of the land of Israel, the browns of the desert, the blue of the sky, and it's also going to create clothes that are going to be comfortable for the Israeli climate. And she starts to design these clothes and she gives out work to immigrants who can work at home, which certainly for the women, this was something that was very advantageous. And then she starts to sell them, and they are not meant for the immigrants. They are very, very, very expensive. They're sold to tourists, they're sold to diplomats, right? And then after 1967, she actually has Palestinian women, Arab women who create, bring their own embroidery. And this is a complicated story, right? On the one hand, she created something very beautiful. She created something very Israeli. Um, she gave jobs to new immigrants. On the other hand, did she take advantage of them? How much did they see of the money that she was making or that the government was making? Is this cultural appropriation, right? We can all ask all kinds of interesting questions. But there is no doubt that the clothes were very, very beautiful, right? They really were very beautiful. The company went bankrupt at a certain point, and today it's restarted again, and it's again very, very expensive. You can look it up online. Okay, a little bit about sports, and then we're going to talk about art. Um, of course, the sports teams of the time, right? Whether they are Hapoel or they are Beitar or they are Maccabi, of course, they are connected to the political movements, like everything is connected to the political movements at the time. Today, we don't think of it so much like that, even though Beitar is certainly still associated with more right wing in Jerusalem and Hapoel with Tel Aviv and more left wing. But certainly that's how it all started out. One of the things that I think is fascinating that starts in the 40s but grows even more in the 50s, this is from the Maccabi movement, right? Maccabi Atzair, the young Maccabi, that they start a torch relay race, which begins at the graves of what's considered to be the graves of the Maccabees near what is today Modi'in. At the time, very, very close to Arab villages, still pretty close to Arab villages. Okay, and you would take the torch. This is a poster from 1950, and they would run with the torch first just to Tel Aviv. Afterwards, it grew and it became more popular, and there were more relayers, and they came all the way to Jerusalem, bringing it to the president's house. This is interesting, first of all, because it's connected to Hanukkah. It's connected to seeing the Maccabees as national heroes, right? This is definitely something that role models of the Maccabees. I didn't go too deeply into sports, not something that I know so much about. There definitely is more to talk about, but we're going to move on to art and artists of the time. So we'll start with
Shulie, are
talking
you aware
about
that your face is taking up most of the share?
that is very bad. I am not aware of that. How do I change that? Really? You're not seeing any of these pictures?
Yeah,
Yikes.
we see
Yes,
the
I'm seeing it fine.
We
You
see
and
the
it's fine.
pictures. We see the pictures.
Yeah, but we see you and the picture.
They're
Like you're
small.
part of the picture.
Which
It's
is
a very
okay.
queer, very queer.
No, it's fine.
It's
There we go.
fine. It's fine. Keep going.
Okay,
Keep
but
going.
keep going.
I'm going. Here I am. Better?
Nothing.
Hey, now share.
No, I'm shared. You're not seeing the
No,
share?
there's
Now we
nothing.
see a black. We have the words Shulie Mishkin. Oh, now there's you again. Oh, only you.
Yes, but I don't want you to see me. I want you to see this. Okay.
You, it was fine.
Now good?
No,
Yes, I
No.
got 1
It
minute.
says Shulie Mishkin has started screen
It
share.
takes a second. It takes a second.
Oh, wait.
Okay, now?
No.
no.
Now?
Yes.
Yes.
There it is.
Yes.
Okay, good. Okay, continuing. Why, so many technical difficulties today? What's going on? Okay, so one thing that is very fascinating, we talked about spaces where people are going to live, right? When we talked about the Great Aliyah, and how many of the Arab neighborhoods and the Arab villages that Arabs had fled from become housing for new immigrants. But we're going to give two examples of places that become not just housing, but a very specific kind of housing, and that's artists' colonies. Okay, already in the early 40s, you have some artists who move up to Tzfat. Okay, among them somebody named Yitzhak Frankel, another person named Moshe Kastel. That's him in the picture here in the middle. Hey, today there's a whole museum to his art in Ma'ale Adumim. Hey, they move up to Tzfat because Tzfat is, it's very attractive to artists. It's very beautiful. The landscape, the history, the stories, and they move up to Tzfat. But Tzfat, up until 1948, is a mixed Arab Jewish town with the vast majority of the inhabitants are Arabs, right? The Jews are 10% of the population, the Arabs are 90%. After the War of Independence, the Jews take Tzfat. The Arabs leave, the Arabs run away, and you have whole areas of the city, particularly the old city, which is the only part of the city, which are emptied out. And if you know Tzfat a little bit, you know that there's a great staircase, and on one side is the Jewish quarter, which has all the synagogues, Yosef Karo and the Ari, etc. And on the other side of the staircase is what we today call the artist colony. This was an Arab neighborhood, mostly Christian Arabs, but also Muslims. And Frankel and Kestel and two other artists, Menachem Shemi and Shimshon Holtzman, they go to the first Jewish mayor of Tzfat, Mayor Padhatzur, and they say, we would like to take over this area and make it into a place for artists, into an artist colony. And the mayor gives them permission to do that. And they take over the old houses. They have to rebuild, right? Tzfat, often you have to rebuild. Some artists come to live there. More artists come kind of, it's a summer residence. Spot is very nice in the summer, or they come for holidays, for vacations. They don't necessarily move in, but you do have a whole art scene where artists come, they live there, or they live there part-time. They open up their homes and their studios for people to come and to see and to visit. They create art there. They take over the mosque that was in the market area and they make it into a general exhibition space, still existing today. And also they create things which, if you've been to Spot anytime in the last 10 years, you will be rather surprised by this. Right? They create a nightclub, Moadon Milo, which is active not only on Saturday nights, but on Friday nights as well. Okay? With music, with drinking, with all kinds of celebrations of anybody who sold a painting. Okay? People come to visit artists, of course, artists usually, and certainly artists in the 50s, and don't have any money. So instead of paying for places to stay, they pay with drawings, and that's why a lot of the hotels or the small Zimmerim have nice collections of art. Hey, so you have a few, you have the general exhibit, you have Moshe Kastel here with one of his paintings on the backdrop of Spot, and you also have this, which still exists today. This is a doorway that's created by Yitzhak Frankel, out of slabs of wood, but with the blue of Spot, right? And this is an artist colony that has its heyday for about 20 years. Today there are artists in Spot, but the artists have gone much more in a religious direction, a Kabbalistic direction. These guys are much more kind of the new wave, the very edgy new kind of art. And that really barely exists in Spot anymore, but this is one of the artist colonies. The other one is on the Carmel, right? Also in the mountains, but a little bit different mountains by the coast. And this is the artist colony of Ein Hod, also an Arab village up until 1948. 1948, the Arabs run away. This is very picturesque. It's in the Carmel Mountains. You have a view of the sea. And you have, again, just like in Spot, but here it's really only one guy, you have an individual who kind of pushes this idea forward. And that's this guy up here in the right corner. His name is Marcel Yanko or Janko. He was an artist, a Romanian artist, very involved in the Dada movement, right? Very modern art, very avant-garde, like the precursor to surrealism. And he comes to Israel. He's Jewish. He's, escaping from the Holocaust. And he decides that he wants this village to become an artist colony. And he goes to the government and he says, can we take over this village? Don't destroy it. The army wants to destroy it. He says, no, I want to keep it. We're going to rehabilitate the houses. We're going to invite artists to come move in, to buy property and to rebuild. In the beginning, he's the only one. He comes and he's working and he's building houses out of the wrecks that are there. Slowly, more and more people come. Sculptors, painters, actors, musicians, writers, designers, and it becomes a real artist village. Today, less than 700 people live there. Just to give you a sense of like the type of people who are living there, out of this small group of residents, 10 Ainhold residents have won the Israel Prize for various artistic activities. Okay, that means that it's a crazy percentage of this tiny group. So it really did take off, and it still exists as an artist village, and tourists come to see it. And those are the people who live there. And that's somewhat different from Tzfat. Let's take a look at some of the artists. Okay, we're going to look at the real new wave and the real modern, but before that, we have artists who are still from pre-state days, but are still important in the 1950s. And one of them is someone named Reuven Rubin. Reuven Rubin, very interesting, also Romanian, comes to Israel as a young man, right? In 1912, he already comes to Israel to study in Bezalel, to study in the art school, which is very new still in 1912. But he doesn't like their approach, and he leaves. He goes back to Europe. He goes to Paris. He travels all over. He goes to the United States. Eventually, in the 1920s, he returns and he starts painting. And his painting is very much in a new style. He very famously writes about how what he's first struck by when he first comes to Israel is the quality of the light, how powerful the light is. The sun is so strong and the sky is so blue, and the colors are so deep and so rich. And a lot of what he paints is landscapes of Israel. And he does all kinds of fascinating things. He's the first person who has a solo exhibit in the Tower of David in 1924. But in the 50s, he paints this painting, which I brought because it's really much more relevant to the stuff that we're talking about. And he calls this First Seder in Jerusalem. And you may be struck by various things about it. First of all, self-portrait. Here he is in the corner with his son and with his wife. Okay. The participants in the Seder are very diverse. Okay. He's expressing all of these new immigrants who are coming from all over the place. And you've got people coming from from Eastern countries, from Arab countries. You've got the ultra-Orthodox rabbi. You've also got the soldier, right? You've got all different kinds of people. And who's over here in the corner? Jesus. Okay, Jesus is at the Seder. Okay, now Jesus at the Seder, and the other thing you might notice about this painting is it's also somewhat influenced by the Last Supper. Right, there's a Last Supper, Ella, the very famous Last Supper of Leonardo da Vinci. That's the Last Supper. This is called the First Seder. And there have been suggestions why Jesus is here. And perhaps the idea being, Last Supper, First Seder, we suffered through so much in the diaspora, and here we are coming back and coming alive again, right? Almost this like resurrection of the Jewish people after all their suffering. So, sort of a little bit of a Jesus motif. But also, you could say, okay, he's looking at it as unity, and we're all going to come back together and be united. As you can imagine, this created controversy, but it's a great picture. Okay, another artist.
Yes, I want to say it's very interesting because in the Haggadah it's written, בכל דור ודור עומדים עלינו לכלותנו, וכאן מראים, they show people from every generation, from everything that they are alive.
Yeah. I don't think every generation, but I think all parts of the spectrum of Jewish life, right? I think that's what it is. Another artist who's less controversial, but also very important, is Nahum Gutman. And Nahum Gutman, unlike a lot of the other people we're talking about here, actually grew up in Tel Aviv. His father was a teacher in Neve Tzedek, and he also studied in Bezalel, went abroad, came back, and really depicts a lot of what we call Tel Aviv Aktana, right? The early days of Tel Aviv. And he writes a lot of children's books, and he's probably most famous in Tel Aviv for these incredible mosaics. He doesn't make the mosaic, he makes the picture, and then the mosaic is made by mosaic artists. But you have two different gorgeous mosaics that he makes. One is on Fountain that was outside of the original City Hall. in Tel Aviv. Today it's outside of, it's right off of Sderot Rothschild, right by the Shalom Tower, and it depicts scenes from Jaffa and Tel Aviv. And the other one is what you see here. When the iconic Gymnasia Herzliya in Tel Aviv was going to be destroyed in the 1960s, which was a terrible thing, and to build a very ugly Shalom Tower, they said, okay, in compensation, we're going to have Nachum Gutman make mosaics about the beginnings of Tel Aviv, and we're going to put them in the lobby of this new, very, very ugly building. And that's what these are. So that's Nachum Gutman. Today, Shalom Tower is also having its own renovations. I'm not sure what the fate of the mosaics are these days. Okay. But those are the more kind of conventional, traditional artists. Now we're going to go into people who are trying to create something very, very new, that's very, very old. And that's what we call the Canaanite movement, or as they called themselves, Noar Ivri. Okay, this is already starting in the late 1930s, where you have a very small but very influential group of writers and artists, led by someone named Yonatan Ratosh, who say, well, Judaism is a religion. And this is this is a question that we ask throughout the ages. Are we a religion? Are we a nation? Are we both? And they say Judaism is a religion. And as a religion, it has no place. It can be everywhere. But we Canaanites, we don't want to be a religion. We are a nation. We want to be connected to the land. We want to be connected to the earlier history of the land, which of course connects back to our shared ancient Near Eastern heritage. And we don't want to have anything to do with diaspora history. We don't want to have anything to do with Zionism. We want to connect to the ancient Near East. We want to read Ugaritic poetry. We want to know about the language of Tanakh. We want to go back to the physical culture, right? The art and the sculpture of the ancient Near East. And like I said, there are very, very few people who are actual members of the Canaanite movement, but a lot of their ideas filter out into a much larger group. This is their flag. Okay, on the one hand, you have like the blue of the sky, right, and the red of the sun, right, or the blue of the sea. But the yellow is an aleph in the ancient Hebrew. It's just turned on its side. Okay, so we're going back to that Ktav Ivri, to that old Hebrew. Okay, sculpture as well, looking at ancient art, at Egyptian art, at primitive art. This is a sculpture called Shebazia by somebody named Yitzchak Danziger. We're going to hear more about him in 1 minute. And it's obviously very, very influenced by Egyptian sculpture. Okay, now Yitzchak Danziger and the school of sculpture that he's part of, this is much more abstract, right? This is a poster for artists called Afikim Chadashim, right? New Horizons, in the Tel Aviv Museum. And some of these artists are sculptors. One of them is named Yechiel Shemi, not the same as the Shemi from Tzfat, a different one. Okay, who is works together with Yitzchak Danziger, and he does abstract. He uses new materials. He uses metal. He makes environmental sculptures. People might know the very large sculpture in the lobby of the Jerusalem Theater. That's Yechiel Shemi. Okay? But the most important and the most controversial sculpture of this time period is this one over here on the right. And this is by Yitzchak Danziger, who is the preeminent sculptor of the time. Okay? And it's called Nimrod. Now, already from the name, it's a little bit shocking, right? Who's Nimrod? Nimrod is not exactly a hero in Tanakh. He is considered to be someone who is, certainly according to the rabbis, he is a mored. He's a rebel against God. Okay? He's a hunter. These are not very Jewish ideas. And here, Danziger takes him as his subject. Okay? He makes him naked. Okay? He's uncircumcised. Okay? He's a hunter. He's got some kind of a sword or a knife behind his back. He's got this falcon on his shoulder. Okay? He looks very pagan. Okay? And when it's first exhibited, this is in 1938, people are very shocked by it, right? He makes it in 1938, it's exhibited in 1944, right? And they say, is this an idol? Or maybe this is what the new Jew looks like, right? And by the time we get to the 1950s, it becomes very popular. People look at it and they say, wow, all right, this is the youth. This is the sign of change. This is rebellion. This is the new way that we want to look. Today, if you go to the Israel Museum, at the entrance to the wing of art, Israeli art, but it's the art wing altogether. Nimrod is at the entrance. He is representing the beginnings of Israeli art. So it's very much controversial, but it's also something that signals a change. Okay, I'm not going to have time to do everything that I wanted to do, but a little bit about memorials, right? The sculpture that's probably most prominent in Israel is unfortunately andartaot, right? Memorials to soldiers, to army units, to people who fell in the various wars. And that also starts to evolve and to change. And it's also a reflection, I think, of society. So you have a lot of classic memorials, and you see these all over the country, which is basically stone, dates, names, right? Very simple, very classic, and not something that's unusual. But you also have new approaches. So, for example, in Kibbutz Negba, okay, major battles with the Egyptians in 1948, sculptor named Nathan Rappaport, very famous for making the sculpture of the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, okay, but he also makes a sculpture of the defenders of Negba. And on the one hand, it's different because it's figurative, right? It's very figurative. It looks like Greek sculpture. It's showing farmers, it's showing women alongside soldiers, right? They're very heroic. So this is a different kind of a memorial. You also have something that's more abstract. Okay? If you go to Mount Herzl, this is a memorial for British Jewish soldiers who were lost at sea because their boat was torpedoed by Nazis. And you have this memorial that's a pool of water with their names all around it. Maybe the most interesting memorials are memorials that try to um, keep the past alive, right? By putting artifacts in the places, keeping them where the story happened. So we saw the tanks in Bab el Wad, right? The tanks that are basically just continuing this story of the road to Jerusalem, and they're sort of frozen in time. This is another tank, Kibbutz Degania, near the Kinneret. Three Syrian tanks advancing on the kibbutz. The kibbutzniks go out, throw Molotov cocktails at them, set them on fire, and the kibbutz is saved. And one of the tanks, unusable, right? Two of them were taken and recycled. One of them was not usable and was left at the gates to the kibbutz, and it became a memorial to this story. It's sort of like the story is continuing. And also something that I think is very interesting, a living memorial. A, one of the earliest memorials to the Jews who fell in the Holocaust is a forest called the Forest of the Martyrs, Yar HaKadoshim, okay, where 6 million trees were planted in memory of the 6 million. So this is a way to say we're going to remember, but we're also going to build. It's going to be part of this Zionist enterprise. So very interesting living history. Okay, we have a bunch of writers. I want to look very briefly at the first two, but then I want to go on to the ones that I think are a little bit more our time period. So you have Natan Alterman. We already mentioned him. And he writes, like we said, this weekly column. He writes a lot of very heavy, very serious poetry, but he also writes a weekly column for the newspaper Davar. And it deals with current events, with things that are happening. So this is one that he wrote in 1950, where he speaks out against Jews in the diaspora who don't want to move to Israel. And he says, "Yitachem be'emet ad chacham harazim ki drushim lanu shnei merkazim." It seems that maybe we need two centers. B'medinat Israel shetifrach v'tasis yishkenu chachmei Tveria, Morocco, Tunis. In Israel, right, we'll have the wise men of Tiberias, but also Morocco, Tunis, right, people who've come here. Aval shar chachameh v'shar Amoria yishkenu lahem b'Cincinnati, Ohio, right? He's responding to American Jews who say, we're not going to leave, we're going to stay, and they can stay in Cincinnati. כך בברוקלין ישבו כל העם שרצית, ויהיה אזרחיה של ניו Pumbedita, right? Pumbedita like in Bavel, and they're going to be in Brooklyn, and they're going to be New Pumbedita. Okay, Leah Goldberg, another beautiful writer, one of the few women that we're having here on this list. And she comes to Israel, and to make ends meet, she works as a translator. She's a lecturer in Hebrew University, but she also writes beautiful children's stories and also very personal poetry, right? Mishirei Eretz Ahavati, from the songs of the land that I love. Um, okay, two authors who kind of go into more different zones, right? Agnon, Shmuel Yosef Agnon, only writer so far to win the Nobel Prize for Hebrew Literature. He delves deep into Jewish sources. Okay, this is his library over here, which you can still visit in Agnon House in Jerusalem. And he uses sources from the Midrash, from the Mishnah, from the Gemara. He uses the language, he uses the ideas. One of his famous stories from the 50s is a story called Tehillah, which is about almost a mythical old woman in the streets of Jerusalem, in the old city in Jerusalem. Another fascinating writer who's not part of this, the bohemian. He's kind of in his own category. Someone named Uri Tzvi Greenberg. He was not part of everybody because he had different politics. He was a revisionist. He very much believed in Jews fighting for their right to exist. He was a follower of Jabotinsky, and he comes to Israel and he clashes with the labor establishment, with the Mapai establishment. Despite that, he wins the Israel Prize in literature, and he really becomes the voice of the more right wing of the revisionists. I'll just read you one line of his. Ve'emet hi Torat Bar Kochva gam binfol Beitar. Bar Kochva was right even though Beitar fell, meaning we still have to fight back against the Romans or the British or the Arabs or whoever it might be. Okay, two last things. One writer, and that's Yehuda Amichai. Yehuda Amichai is in a very different milieu than most of these guys. Okay, they're in Tel Aviv, they're in the center, they're part of the whole, trendy Tel Aviv life. Yehuda Amichai is in Jerusalem, and he's not only in Jerusalem, he's in divided Jerusalem. He lives in Yemim Moshe, he lives in Abu Tor, he lives literally on the border. Okay, his landscape is different, and therefore his thinking is different. Okay, unlike most of these guys, he's actually sees Arabs, right? Doesn't have personal contact with them because they're across the border, but he understands that we're living in kind of this divided world, and he writes about it. And this is one of his very famous poems, 1955. He's looking out his window at the Hinnom Valley, which is the no man's land between Israel's Jerusalem and Jordan's Jerusalem. An Arab shepherd is searching for his goat on Mount Zion. An Arab shepherd is searching for his goat on Mount Zion. On the opposite hill, I am searching for my little boy. An Arab shepherd and a Jewish father, both in their temporary failure, are two voices met above the Sultan's pool in the valley between us. Neither of us wants the boy or the goat to get caught in the wheels of the Chadgadya machine, right? Chadgadya meaning slaughter. Afterwards, we found them among the bushes, and our voices came back inside us, laughing and crying. Searching for a goat or for a child has always been the beginning of a new religion in these mountains. So I think a little of the complexity of divided Jerusalem. And we'll just finish with two last things. Movies. Okay, we said no TV, but definitely movies. The early movies, late 40s, 50s to 1960, whether they're from Israel, right? Whether they're from government-sponsored bodies like the Jewish Agency or the World Zionist Organization, or from Hollywood, but with a lot of support, filming in Israel and supporting Israel. So we have things like Hill 24 Doesn't Answer, and of course, Exodus, are very much about the myth of the fighting Sabra, right? And defending ourselves and portraying Israel to the world in a very specific way. By the time we get towards the end of the 50s, we're starting to think about more satire, more commercial movies, right? And we, of course, have Salach Shabati, which is the early 60s. Hey, here's Chaim Topol again, making fun of the government making fun of the mass aliyah, making fun of the olim, making fun of everything, and just looking at ourselves with a little bit more of a satirical eye. And one other one that's very interesting, not really either of these categories. This was an exhibit in the Israel Museum this year. Some people here may have seen it. Called Chris Marker, The Lost Photographs. Chris Marker was a French filmmaker, and he was approached by Leah Van Leer from Jerusalem, from the Cinematheque in Jerusalem, to make an artistic quality film about Israel. And he comes and he makes something called Description of a Struggle, and it's a fascinating. It's not quite propaganda. It's not quite critical. It's really both. Okay, and finally, Petra, the Red Rock, Hasela Hadom. You had people who would go on this very daring, very dangerous trip to Jordan to see Petra. It became kind of this adventure that was like the thing you had to do. And there was a song that was written about it called To the Red Rock, El Hasela Hadom, famously sung by Arik Lavi in 1958. And it was forbidden to be played on the radio because the fear was that it would encourage young people to take this very, very dangerous journey where people had been killed. And it was banned from the radio for a long time. Okay, so this is kind of a little potpourri of many different kinds of cultural ideas. We have many comments here. Let's see. Yeah, Jordanian TV, we sort of answered a little bit. Not ready for primetime players. Lul, yes, exactly. Um, yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in the Israeli Film Archive and also in the Cinematheque archive. And most of these things are free. So yeah, just cool to go and to explore. There's a lot of really cool stuff. And that movie of Chris Marker's is there too. Rehov Falafel, okay, very good. Wedding Just from Mesquite. Ooh, I want to see that. Send me a picture. 10 people won the Israel Prize from Ein Hod. Yeah, Rubin's Hasidic Last Supper. Good, Ruth, you got it before I even said it. Oh, Yochanan Ratosh, interesting. Yonatan, exactly. Sorry. Nimrod, yeah, I don't think the sandals are connected at all, but interesting. And yes, songs from Shalama School, definitely. So go put on your YouTube playlist, songs of the 50s, lots of great songs out there. We are going to do a new series. I don't know the start date yet, probably the beginning of February, about others in Israeli society, Karaites, Samaritans, Christians, Druze, all different kinds of stuff. Happy to have everybody. Shabbat Shalom, and thank you for all your patience in the technical difficulties.
Thank you.
Thank you,
שבת
Shulie.
שלום ותודה רבה
שבת
לך.
שלום.
Shabbat
תמיד
shalom.
נהדר לשמוע אותך.
Thank you so much for the wonderful series.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Have a good Shabbat.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.